A single burst of flame could clear a bunker or kill the man holding it. Because on Iwo Jima, the most feared weapon on the battlefield wasn't just deadly to the enemy, it was fatal to the one carrying it. And for the men behind the flame, survival often ended the moment they pulled the trigger. Iwo Jima was only 8 square miles, smaller than most cities. But in 1945, it became one of the bloodiest and most nightmarish battlefields of World War II. When the Marines landed, they expected a quick victory. They had bombed and shelled the island for days. But under the black volcanic rock, the Japanese had built a fortress. 11 miles of tunnels, bunkers, and pillboxes stretched under the surface. Every inch was defended. Every slope was a trap. Marines soon realized that no amount of bullets or shells could reach an enemy that lived underground. To destroy what they couldn't see, they needed a weapon that could reach into the dark. The answer came in a terrifying form: the flamethrower. At first, it seemed simple: a tank of thick fuel on a Marine's back, a hose, and a nozzle that shot fire 30 yards forward. The most common model, the M2, weighed about 70 pounds. 2 main tanks carried 5 gallons of thickened gasoline mixed with diesel. A smaller third tank held compressed nitrogen to push the fuel out. At the tip of the hose sat a small ignition system, usually white phosphorus, that sparked a jet of flame hotter than 1,000 degrees. It could only fire for about 10 seconds in total. 10 seconds to clear a bunker. 10 seconds to live or die. But those 10 seconds would make flamethrowers both the most effective and the most feared weapon on Iwo Jima. Using a flamethrower wasn't just dangerous, it was suicidal. The operator carried 2 metal cylinders on his back filled with flammable gel. Japanese soldiers knew exactly what they were. From 100 yards away, those twin tanks stood out like a beacon. Everyone on the battlefield, snipers, machine gunners, even mortar crews, aimed at one target first: the flamethrower man. Once seen, he was marked for death. Some units called them walking torches. Others called them one-way tickets. Every operator knew the moment he pulled the trigger, the entire battlefield would turn on him. Statistics on Iwo Jima were horrifying. Flamethrower operators had a 92% casualty rate, and an average life expectancy of 4 minutes once combat began. That meant most never survived a single mission. The moment they fired, the bright stream of flame gave away their position instantly. Some were cut down before they even reached a bunker. Others were shot through the fuel tanks, which, surprisingly, didn't always explode. The tanks were steel and could deflect small-caliber rounds, but the operator's body was not so lucky. Even when hit by non-explosive rounds, the impact could puncture valves or ignite leaking fuel. In that case, the operator had seconds before the fire reached his back. And if the flamethrower misfired, his chances of survival were even worse. The M2 wasn't reliable. The ignition system could jam, the nozzle could clog, the fuel line could twist. If that happened, there was no backup. One Marine on Iwo Jima pulled his trigger and nothing happened. His weapon failed. 2 Japanese soldiers rushed from a tunnel, grabbed him and dragged him inside. Other Marines outside heard his screams for 2 days before they stopped. Being captured as a flamethrower operator meant certain death. They were hated more than snipers or spies. No one who used fire as a weapon was shown mercy. So the Marines looked for a way to protect the men carrying the deadliest weapon on the island. The answer came in the form of a tank. Literally. To survive longer than 4 minutes, the flamethrower needed armor. Engineers modified Sherman tanks to carry flamethrowers instead of cannons. The new version was called the M4A3R3, or more simply, the Flame Sherman. These tanks could carry over 300 gallons of thickened fuel and project it 3 times farther than a man-portable unit, nearly 100 yards. They still used the same basic firing system, but were now protected by steel instead of flesh. Each Flame Sherman was escorted by infantry and other tanks. Their job? To to keep enemy soldiers from getting close enough to destroy it. But armor didn't make them invincible. It just meant the fire came with a crew inside. When a flamethrower tank was hit, the results were catastrophic. The M4's armor was thick, but not thick enough to withstand a direct anti-tank shell or explosive charge. Inside, the crew of 5, commander, driver, gunner, assistant driver, and loader, sat beside hundreds of gallons of volatile fuel. One well-placed hit could rupture a fuel line or tank. If the tank's internal systems ignited, the result was instant. The confined space turned into an inferno. Even if the crew survived the initial hit, they had seconds to escape.
Some managed to climb out through the top hatches, but others never made it. The same weapon meant to burn the enemy could turn its own crew into fire victims in an instant. Every mission with a flame tank was a gamble, one spark away from becoming a coffin. Despite the danger, crews and operators continued their missions. The reason was simple: flamethrowers worked. Nothing else could clear tunnels and bunkers buried under rock. Grenades couldn't reach. Shells couldn't penetrate. But a jet of fire could. When Marines needed to root out a hidden pillbox, the flamethrower became their last option. Operators would crawl forward under covering fire, get within range, and unleash fire through vents or openings. The confined heat built to thousands of degrees. It burned oxygen, creating a vacuum that killed those inside instantly. That was how Marines survived, by becoming the thing the enemy feared most. And sometimes, that fear turned one man into a legend. On February 23, 1945, the same day the flag was raised on Mount Suribachi, a 21-year-old Marine named Herschel Woody Williams was sent forward with his flamethrower. Machine gun fire had pinned his unit. Marines were dying every time they tried to advance. Williams crawled forward, shielded by the bodies of fallen comrades and the covering fire of 4 men behind him. 2 of those 4 were killed almost immediately. But Woody reached the first pillbox. He shoved his nozzle into an air vent and pulled the trigger. The bunker erupted. He ran back, swapped his empty flamethrower for a full one, and kept going. For nearly 5 hours, Williams burned through enemy defenses one by one. When Japanese soldiers charged him with bayonets, he met them with fire. For his actions, he received the Medal of Honor, the only flamethrower operator in World War II to do so. He lived until 2022, passing away at 98 years old. But for every Woody Williams who survived, dozens more never made it off that island. On Iwo Jima alone, 335 flamethrower operators were deployed. Only 18 survived. Most were killed within minutes of entering combat. Some died before firing a single shot. Others burned when their tanks were hit or when fuel leaked during use. The battlefield gave them no mercy. Their comrades knew what was coming and still volunteered. Because without flamethrowers, the Marines couldn't break through. And even when the war ended, the scars it left behind didn't fade. Flamethrower operators and crews who survived often carried nightmares for life. They had seen what their weapon did, and what it could do to them. Some described the screams of burning soldiers echoing through tunnels. Others could still feel the heat on their faces decades later. Even Woody Williams said he remembered little of that day. His mind had blocked it out. For tank crews, survival didn't erase the fear. One hit could have turned their entire vehicle into a furnace. Many veterans of flame tanks said they never stopped smelling the fuel. The weapon that won battles left its mark on those who used it most. So what really happens to a flamethrower crew after a hit? If it's a backpack operator, a bullet through the tank can rupture the line, spilling burning gel. The flame flashes back, engulfing the Marine. If it's a tank crew, a shell through the armor ignites hundreds of gallons inside, trapping them in a metal inferno. Either way, there's no time to scream, no time to react. Only seconds before the fire takes everything.
For those nearby, the aftermath is unforgettable. The air turns to smoke, the ground trembles, and silence follows where life once was. The fire doesn't just kill. It consumes everything, even memory. On Iwo Jima, the flamethrower was both savior and curse. It broke the enemy's will, but it broke its operators too. They fought in heat no human should endure, carrying death on their backs, walking into the fire so others wouldn't have to. Of the hundreds who went forward, almost none came home. The Marines won the island, but at a terrible price. And that's what happens to a flamethrower crew after a hit. They don't just burn once. They carry the fire forever.